Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto is brought into the world of One Piece and fell in love with Yamato. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Golden Whirlwind. The air in the training grounds behind the Hokage Tower hummed with a power that could reshape mountains. It tasted of ozone and ancient forests, a familiar cocktail of natural energy that Naruto Uzumaki drank in like water. He stood on one leg atop the highest spire of the memorial monument, a tiny, unmoving silhouette against the vast blue canvas of the sky. His eyes were closed, orange pigment framing them in the unmistakable mark of a perfect sage. Peace. It was a state he had fought and bled and nearly died for, a concept that had once been as foreign as a silent Kurama. Now, it was the bedrock of his life. The Great War was a scar on the world's memory, but the healing had begun. Sasuke was on his journey of atonement, the villages were bound by an alliance stronger than any in history, and the whispers of Akatsuki were ghosts in dusty history books. This was his new purpose, to maintain that peace. To be the pillar so strong it could weather any storm. And that required strength, not of the kind used to obliterate enemies, but the kind used to deter them. The kind that said, do not even try it. So he trained. Not with the frantic desperation of his youth, but with the focused discipline of a master. He was exploring the very edges of what Six Paths Sage Mode could do, touching upon the conceptual powers that had made Kaguya a goddess. He had found lingering traces of her space-time abilities within his own chakra, microscopic tears in the fabric of reality that he could, with immense concentration, perceive. He wasn't trying to replicate her Yamato Hirasaka, he had no desire to hop between dimensions. He was simply trying to understand. To know his own power, inside and out. Kurama grumbled from the warm, sunlit space of his consciousness. You're poking a sleeping bear with a very short stick, Naruto. It's fine, Naruto projected back, his focus unwavering. It's just an echo. A footprint. If I can understand how she did it, I can be ready if anyone else ever tries. A footprint can still lead you off a cliff, the great fox retorted, though the usual bite was gone from his tone. It was the easy grumbling of an old friend. Naruto found one of the echoes now. It felt different from the others, colder, sharper. Less like a footprint and more like a splinter. It was nestled deep within the nexus of his own chakra and the natural energy flowing through him. He reached out to it with a thread of his own consciousness, intending only to observe. It was a fatal mistake. The moment his chakra touched the splinter, it did not react, it detonated. It wasn't an explosion of force, but of wrongness. The world twisted. The familiar taste of natural energy turned to ash in his mouth. The sounds of Konoha, the distant chatter, the birds, the wind, screamed into a single, piercing shriek that vibrated in his bones. A violent, invisible force latched onto him, pulling not at his body, but at his very existence. Naruto! Pull back! Kurama's roar was one of genuine alarm. Naruto tried. He flooded his system with his own chakra, a golden tidal wave meant to overwhelm the foreign energy, but it was like trying to douse an oil fire with water. The splinter wasn't fighting him, it was unzipping the reality around him. A black seam tore through the blue sky, a jagged, soundless void that bled absolute nothingness. He felt a hum, a subsonic vibration that resonated below the shriek of tearing space. It was a note of pure entropy, a chord of cosmic silence that promised oblivion. It was ancient and hungry. The pull became irresistible. The monument beneath his foot vanished. The sky, the village, the world, it all smeared into a vortex of screaming colors. He felt his connection to the natural energy of his planet snap like a frayed rope. The loss was so profound it was a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs. He was an island being ripped from its continent. His body, now glowing with a frantic, uncontrolled aura of Six Paths energy, was dragged toward the black seam. He fought, clawing at the collapsing space around him, but it was like trying to swim up a waterfall. "It's taking us!" Kurama bellowed, his power surging to join Naruto's in a desperate, futile struggle. The last thing Naruto saw of his world was the horrified face of his own reflection in the polished black stone of the memorial, twisted and elongated as he was pulled through the crack in existence. Then, there was only darkness, pressure, and a single, final, deafening snap. The transition was less a journey and more a cessation. One moment he was in a violent vortex of non-reality, the next he was, not. He was falling. The shriek of tearing space was replaced by the roar of wind whipping past his ears. The suffocating pressure was gone, replaced by a stomach-lurching plunge. He forced his eyes open, his senses reeling. The sky was a shade of blue he'd never seen before, dotted with clouds that seemed impossibly fluffy, almost comical. Below him was a churning, angry ocean, a furious expanse of dark turquoise. And rising from that ocean was an island that defied all logic. It was colossal, a mountainous landmass shaped into a gargantuan horned skull. A fortress, a palace, a monument to something monstrous, was built directly into and around it. Smoke plumed from dozens of locations, the sounds of explosions and battle reaching him even from this great height. It was a war zone. Where am I? The thought was a gasp. His sage mode was still active, but it felt muted. The vibrant life energy of his world was gone, replaced by something weaker, thinner. He could feel the collective rage, fear, and bloodlust from the island below, a chaotic symphony of negative emotion, but the planet itself felt quiet, distant. His fall accelerated. The instincts of 1,000 battles took over. He twisted his body, controlling his descent, channeling a thin layer of chakra to his feet to absorb the coming impact. He wasn't aiming for a soft landing, he was aiming for a stable one. The chaos intensified as he neared the island. He saw people, humans, yes, but also things that were, not. A man with the lower body of a horse. A woman with wings sprouting from her back. They fought against warriors clad in what looked like samurai armor. The clash of steel, the bizarre shouts, the boom of what sounded like cannons, it was a sensory nightmare. He was a golden comet streaking toward the heart of it. He chose his landing spot in a split second, a wide courtyard teeming with the strangely proportioned combatants, who were systematically overwhelming a smaller group of samurai. He adjusted his trajectory, his six paths cloak flaring behind him like the tail of a phoenix. He hit the ground. The impact was not a crash, but a declaration. He landed in a three-point crouch, one hand pressed to the stone ground. The courtyard paving cracked, spiderwebbing out from his point of impact in a perfect 10-meter circle. The sheer kinetic force sent a shockwave outwards, kicking up a hurricane of dust and debris. Friend and foe alike were thrown from their feet, stumbling back from the epicenter of his arrival. Silence fell over the courtyard, a pocket of stunned disbelief in the middle of a war. Naruto rose to his full height, his golden chakra cloak shimmering, the 9 truth-seeking orbs hovering placidly behind his back. His eyes, sage-marked and sharp, scanned the scene in an instant. The samurai, battered and bleeding, stared at him with wide, incredulous eyes. Their opponents, a motley crew of brutes with horns, animalistic features, and cruel smirks, looked at him with a mixture of confusion and predatory curiosity. One of them, a giant of a man with the head and powerful legs of a bull, laughed, a low, rumbling sound. Well. Look what fell from the sky. Did one of Kaido's drinking buddies get lost? He hefted a massive, spiked club. Doesn't matter. More meat for the grinder. The bullman charged, his hooved feet pounding against the stone, shaking the ground. The other beast pirates, as Naruto's mind vaguely labeled them, grinned and raised their weapons, seeing him as just a new, shiny toy. Naruto didn't move. His senses, muted as they were still divine compared to anyone here. He felt the man's intent, the crude bloodlust, the surprisingly simple path of his charge. It was pathetic. It was slow. I don't know who you are, Naruto thought, his expression hardening. I don't know where I am. But you're attacking people who can't fight back. That's all I need to know. Just as the Bullman's club was about to descend, a weapon meant to crush him into paste, Naruto vanished. Not a flicker, not a blur. He was simply gone. The club smashed into the ground where he had been, shattering the already cracked stone. Before the Bullman could even register his surprise, Naruto reappeared at his side, a hand resting gently on the creature's thick arm. You're too loud, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear in the sudden silence. He didn't even clench his fist. A pulse of raw, untamed nature energy, a perfectly controlled burst of frog kata, flowed from his palm into the man's body. The Bullman's eyes went wide. He didn't fly backwards. He simply folded, his muscles seizing and then going limp. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious before he hit the ground. The other beast pirates froze. Their smirks vanished. One of the samurai, a man with a bandage over one eye, whispered in awe, what was that? Naruto ignored him. He looked at the remaining dozen pirates. Leave, he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by a presence that felt as heavy as a mountain. For a moment, they hesitated. Then, their bravado returned, fueled by numbers and the culture of brutality they lived in. Get him. He's just one man, a woman with a scorpion's tail shrieked, lunging forward. Naruto sighed. He had no time for this. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had happened. This was a distraction. One he would end quickly. He raised his right hand, palm up. The air above it began to scream. Chakra, dense and violent, swirled into a sphere, and then four massive, blade-like points erupted from its circumference, spinning with a sound that tore at the very air. A miniature hurricane of pure, cutting wind, howling with killing intent. Raisin Shuriken. The pirates' eyes widened in primal terror. They didn't know what it was, but every instinct in their bodies screamed that it was death. What is that thing? Fall back. Too late. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent the spiraling shuriken of doom flying. It didn't travel in a straight line, it expanded, growing into a monstrous vortex of wind blades nearly as wide as the courtyard itself. It engulfed the charging pirates in a blinding sphere of chaos. There were no screams, the sound of the technique itself devoured them. For 3 seconds, the world was a maelstrom. Then, silence. The sphere of wind dissipated, revealing nothing. The pirates were gone. Not blown away, not cut to pieces. Utterly, molecularly disintegrated. A wide, shallow crater smoked where they had stood. The samurai stared, their mouths agape. The battle raging in the rest of the fortress seemed to dim, the sounds distant and unimportant. In this courtyard, a god had just descended and erased their enemies from existence. Naruto let out a slow breath, the golden cloak receding slightly. He hadn't wanted to do that. It was overkill, a brutal display. But it was efficient. He felt a pang of guilt, quickly suppressed. These weren't shinobi. They were just brutes. Their life force is strange, Kurama noted, his own senses probing the world. Weak. Like flickering candles. Nothing like the chakra networks we know. I feel it too, Naruto thought. This place, it's wrong. It's thin. He turned his attention to the samurai, his expression softening. Are you all alright? Before any of them could answer, a new presence announced itself. It was a pressure, a wave of spiritual energy that washed over the courtyard, making the air thick and heavy. It was different from his own, wilder, less controlled, but undeniably powerful. It felt like a king's proclamation, a raw assertion of will. Haki. The term surfaced from the jumbled mess of information he'd absorbed from the pirates' minds in the split second before their annihilation. Conqueror's Haki. From a shattered archway at the far end of the courtyard, a figure emerged. It was a tall, striking person, clad in an oversized samurai garb of white, red, and purple. A flowing white cloak was draped over their shoulders, and two imposing red horns curled from their head, framing a face of fierce, determined beauty. In their hands, they gripped a massive, black, spiked kanabo. But it was the eyes that held Naruto's attention. They were a brilliant, fiery orange gold, burning with a furious intensity. And they were locked directly on him. The person's voice was strong, feminine, yet carried with a deliberate, masculine cadence. You are not one of the alliance. And you're clearly not with my father. Who are you? What is that power? Naruto's sage senses flared. This person was on another level entirely from the fodder he'd just dealt with. Their life force was a roaring bonfire, and the energy crackling around their club was immense. Stronger than the Raikage. Maybe stronger than Tsunade. That's my line, Naruto replied, his stance relaxed but ready. I just got here. A very, very bad day is what I'm having. And you are. The horned figure took a powerful step forward, the ground groaning under their feet. I have no name to give an unknown element. You obliterated my father's soldiers with a casual wave of your hand. That makes you a threat. Father? Her father is the one in charge here. Naruto's mind raced. So this was royalty. A princess of the monsters. Your father's soldiers were about to kill these people, Naruto said, gesturing to the wounded samurai. I stopped them. If that makes me a threat in your eyes, then maybe you're on the wrong side. A flicker of something, confusion. Frustration, crossed her face. My father is Kaido. I am not on his side. I am Kazuki Oden. And I will see Wano freed, she declared, her voice ringing with passionate conviction. The declaration, loud and proud, hung in the air. The samurai behind Naruto gasped. Yamato-sama, one of them breathed. Yamato. Kaido's child. But she calls herself Oden. The contradictions were jarring. Naruto had no context for any of this, but he understood conviction when he saw it. And this person, Yamato, was burning with it. But her energy was pointed at him. She saw his power not as a potential asset, but as an unknown variable in a very delicate equation. An unknown she needed to test. Oden would not have tolerated a mysterious power appearing on Onigashima without understanding it, Yamato stated, her knuckles white on the grip of her club. She lowered her stance, the air around her club beginning to crackle with black and red lightning. I will gauge your strength myself. If you are an enemy of Wano, I will crush you. Naruto's easygoing demeanor vanished. The temperature dropped. His golden eyes narrowed, and the 9 black orbs behind him shifted, 2 of them elongating into sharp, defensive rods held in his hands. I told you, he said, his voice now low and dangerous, a predator's growl. I'm having a very bad day. Don't push me. Yamato didn't listen. With a roar that was more beast than human, she charged. She wasn't just fast, she moved like a bolt of lightning, closing the 50-meter distance between them in the blink of an eye. The sheer force of her movement tore up the stone behind her. Reimai hack. She swung the massive kanabo in a horizontal arc aimed at his head. It was a blur of motion, wrapped in a terrifying black lightning of advanced hockey. It was a blow designed to shatter mountains, an attack worthy of an emperor's child. Naruto didn't dodge. He didn't have to. His right arm shot up, and in his palm, a perfect sphere of swirling blue chakra materialized, a miniature galaxy of controlled power. Rasengan. He met the hockey-infused club head-on with his chakra-infused palm. The impact was cataclysmic. It wasn't a boom. It was a silent, world-shattering crack. A dome of pure, colorless energy erupted from the point of contact, vaporizing the air itself. The ground beneath them disintegrated, plunging them both into a newly formed crater. The remaining walls of the courtyard buckled and collapsed. The samurai and the few remaining pirates still watching were sent flying like ragdolls. But in the eye of the storm, Naruto and Yamato were locked in a stalemate. The spiked face of the Kanabo strained against the spinning sphere of the Rasengan, neither giving an inch. Black lightning warred with golden chakra, spitting and hissing. But the clash was more than just physical. The moment their energies met, something else connected. A torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion, of pure soul, flooded the space between them. Naruto felt it first, a lifetime of suffocation. He saw a vision, a flash of a little girl with horns, shackled in explosive cuffs, crying in a dark cave. He felt the sting of a father's fist, the crushing weight of a name she never wanted, the desperate, yearning scream for a freedom she had only ever read about in a stolen journal. He felt the suffocating loneliness of being a monster's child, a prisoner in her own home, her only escape a dead man's dream. It was a pain he knew in his own bones, the pain of the cage. Yamato felt it too. She had expected to feel malice, arrogance, the cold indifference of a killer. Instead, she was slammed with a wave of profound, soul-deep loneliness. She saw a small blond boy, ostracized by an entire village, his eyes begging for an acknowledgement that never came. She felt the weight of a hated power sealed inside him, the burden of being a weapon, a pariah. She felt his desperate struggle to protect a world that had scorned him, the iron will to never, ever give up. She saw the ghosts of his past, the friends he'd saved, the enemies he'd forgiven, and she felt a yearning for connection so powerful it was a physical ache. It was the same scream. The same desperate prayer for freedom, for acceptance, for a place to belong. Their eyes met across the 2 feet of reality-bending space separating them. The fury in Yamato's gaze faltered, replaced by sheer, stunned shock. Naruto's hardened expression softened into one of dawning, empathetic understanding. He saw her. And she saw him. The moment was broken by a roar from above. Don't just stand there. Kill them both. A hulking figure, a man who seemed to be part gorilla, leaped down from a ruined wall, his fists raised to bring them down on the locked combatants. He was one of the numbers, one of Kaido's ancient giant experiments. The connection shattered. Instinct took over. Simultaneously, Naruto and Yamato broke their stalemate. They leaped apart, landing gracefully on opposite sides of the new crater. The number landed between them with a ground-shaking thud. Intruders must be eliminated, the gorilla giant bellowed. Before it could even turn, Yamato was moving. Get out of my way, she yelled, swinging her kanabo in a powerful upward arc that smashed into the giant's side. The blow sent the massive creature stumbling, but it didn't go down. From the shattered archways, more beast pirates poured in, drawn by the titanic clash. They were a mix of gifters, pleasures, and standard grunts, a tide of snarling faces and bizarre animal parts. Naruto landed beside Yamato, their backs almost touching. The air was thick with tension, not between them anymore, but around them. Looks like your dad's family reunion is popular, Naruto said, his tone dry. He didn't take his eyes off the approaching horde. Yamato grunted, her knuckles white on her club. Her mind was reeling from the vision, the feeling, the impossible kinship she had felt in that clash. This golden man, who was he? What was he? They're not my family, she growled, her gaze fixed on the enemy. And that was my father's club. This is me. She shifted her grip on her kanabo. Naruto glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. He saw the genuine conflict in her face, the fierce pride warring with deep-seated pain. He saw the shackles on her wrists. Not explosive cuffs anymore, but still shackles. A symbol. All right, Odin, Naruto said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It wasn't mocking. It was acknowledging. You take the left. Yamato blinked. He wasn't questioning her. He wasn't mocking her identity. He was accepting it and getting on with the business of survival. It was so straightforward, so simple, it was disarming. A slow, fierce grin spread across her face. It was the first genuine smile she'd had all day. Fine. But try to keep up. Believe it, Naruto shot back. The first wave of beast pirates charged. What followed was not a fight. It was a symphony of destruction. Naruto and Yamato moved with an unconscious, terrifying synergy. He was a whirlwind of gold and orange, a blur of motion. He didn't use grand, flashy jutsu. He used pure, unadulterated skill. A Rasengan in one hand to obliterate a gifter, a chakra-enhanced kick to send 3 pirates flying with the other, a black receiver rod thrown with pinpoint accuracy to disable a sniper on a ledge. He flowed like water, an unstoppable force meeting 100 brittle objects. Yamato was the storm. She was pure, overwhelming power. Her kanabo was a force of nature, each swing carrying the weight of a falling mountain. Where Naruto was precise and fluid, she was devastating and absolute. She met a charge head-on, her hockey-infused club shattering swords and armor alike. She unleashed a blast of glacial ice from her mouth, Namuji Hyojie, freezing a group of pirates solid, and Naruto, without missing a beat, used the frozen statues as stepping stones to launch himself at an enemy in the back. He covered her flanks, she crushed anything that got past his guard. He was speed, she was power. A perfect, deadly partnership born from a single moment of shared understanding. The courtyard was cleared in less than a minute. The pirates lay groaning, frozen, or unconscious. None were dead on Naruto's side of the field. Many were broken on Yamato's. They stood in the center of the carnage, breathing lightly, their backs to each other. The scale of the battle raging across the rest of the island seemed to press in on them again. "You're not from Wano," Yamato stated, her voice quieter now. It wasn't an accusation. "No," Naruto said, his golden aura finally fading completely, leaving him in his simple black and orange attire. The truth-seeking orbs melted back into his chakra. "Not even from this world, I think." He finally let the exhaustion, the disorientation, the sheer mind-breaking reality of his situation, wash over him. He stumbled a step, catching himself on a piece of rubble. The adrenaline was fading, and the psychic whiplash was setting in. His world was gone. Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, Hinata, his children, were they even real anymore? Or had he been ripped from time itself? A sharp pain lanced through his heart, colder and more terrifying than any physical blow. Yamato saw the shift. The godlike warrior vanished, replaced by a man suddenly looking profoundly lost. She saw the flash of deep, soul-crushing pain in his eyes. It was the same look she sometimes saw in her own reflection. She turned to face him fully. "You're hurt." Naruto shook his head, pushing the grief down. Now was not the time. Survive first. Grieve later. "I'm fine. Just, a long day." He looked at her, really looked at her, in the relative quiet. The proud horns, the determined jaw, the eyes that held a hurricane of emotion. And the shackles. He couldn't stop looking at the shackles. "Kaido's kid, huh?" Yamato stiffened. "I am nothing like him." "I know," Naruto said, his voice soft but firm. The simple, two-word statement held more validation than 1,000 people cheering her name. He believed her. Utterly. Because he'd felt it. He'd felt the truth of her soul. Her breath hitched. She stared at him, this impossible stranger who fell from the sky, wielded apocalyptic power, and saw past the horns, past the name, past the Odin she hid behind, and straight into her caged heart. Before she could form a reply, a new sound cut through the air. It wasn't the clash of the battle. It was a low, unnatural hum, a vibration that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was the same sound he'd heard as reality tore open. Naruto's head snapped up, his sage mode flaring back to life as he tried to pinpoint the source. The hum was faint, almost imperceptible, a discordant note in the symphony of the world. It felt like a spot of rot on a perfect fruit, a patch of silence in a loud room. It made the hairs on his arms stand up. There, Kurama grunted in his mind. Where you came through. It left a wound. Naruto could feel it. A scar. Not on the island, but on the world itself. An echo of the void that had swallowed him. And it felt hungry. What is it? Yamato asked, her own powerful instincts telling her something was deeply wrong. What do you feel? Naruto's eyes were distant, focused on something she couldn't see. A problem, he said, his voice grim. A much bigger problem. The fate of this island, this country, it was suddenly feeling like the least of his worries. He had been pulled from his home, from his life, and in his place, it felt like something else had been given away in. He pushed the thought aside, forcing himself back to the present. The larger threat was for later. The immediate one was an island-sized fortress full of enemies, ruled by a monster whose child was now standing in front of him, looking at him with an expression of guarded, hopeful bewilderment. He offered her a small, tired, but genuine smile. But first things first. You want to free this country, he asked, nodding towards the towering main structure of the fortress, where he could sense a monstrous, overwhelming life force that dwarfed even Yamato's. Kaido. Looks like we're headed in the same direction. Yamato stared at his outstretched hand, then back to his face. For the first time, the path Oden had laid out in his journal felt less like a script to be followed and more like the start of an adventure she could truly call her own. She gripped her kanabo, the familiar way to comfort. The rooftop is that way, she said, pointing with her club. If you can really help, then prove it. But if you get in my way, I won't, Naruto promised. And in that moment, under the strange sky of a world that wasn't his, surrounded by enemies, he felt the first, tiny flicker of something he hadn't felt since the moment reality broke. Not peace. Not happiness. But purpose. Together, they turned towards the heart of the fortress, a golden whirlwind and an Oni princess, ready to face a dragon. Chapter 2, The Oni Princess and the Nine-Tailed Sage. The decision was made in a heartbeat, a silent pact forged in the dust and ruin of the courtyard. There was no time for formal introductions or strategic councils. There was only the towering fortress, the screams of the dying, and a shared, unspoken understanding that the only way was forward. This way. Yamato's voice cut through the din. She didn't wait for an answer, already moving with a fluid power that made the massive kanabo in her hand seem like an extension of her own body. She vaulted over a pile of rubble and disappeared into a darkened corridor, the rhythmic thud of her sandals against stone a clear path for him to follow. Naruto was right behind her. The interior of the fortress was a chaotic labyrinth of stone, steel, and garish decorations. Paper lanterns painted with sneering demonic faces cast a sickly red and yellow glow over everything. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, spilled sake, and blood. Every few feet, they passed a fallen combatant, sometimes a samurai, more often one of the bizarrely shaped beast pirates. The war was not just in the courtyards, it was in every hall, on every staircase. So, who's Oden? Naruto asked, his voice steady as he kept pace with her effortless jog. And why do you call yourself him? It was a blunt question, but he had a feeling she wouldn't respond to delicate phrasing. Yamato smashed her club through a wooden barricade without breaking stride, the timbers exploding into splinters. Kazuki Oden was a man who was too big for this country, she said, her voice filled with a reverence that was almost religious. He was a samurai of immense power, a free spirit who sailed the seas with the pirate king himself. He came back to Wano to open its borders to the world, but he was betrayed and executed by my father and the usurper shogun, Orochi. She glanced back at him, her golden eyes burning with passion. I found his journal after his death. It detailed his adventures, his dreams, his will. My father tried to beat it out of me, to force me to be his heir. But Oden's will became my own. I will finish what he started. For Wano, I am Kazuki Oden. Naruto processed this. A dead hero. A secret journal. A child finding a purpose in another's legacy to escape the shadow of their monstrous parent. It was a story he could understand all too well. It echoed Jiraiya, the third Hokage, his own parents, the legacies he'd inherited and struggled to live up to. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a patrol. 5 beast pirates, led by a man with the spindly, twitching legs of a spider sprouting from his back. Intruders. It's Kaido's brat and, him, the Spider-Man hissed, pointing a clawed hand at Naruto. Naruto didn't even give them a chance to set up. He blurred forward, a golden flicker. 1, 2, 3, 4 precise chops to the back of their necks. The 4 grunts crumpled. The Spider-Man, shocked by the sudden speed, tried to scuttle back, spitting a web of sticky goo. Naruto didn't dodge it. He simply held up a hand, and a paper-thin, transparent barrier of chakra shimmered into existence, the web splatting harmlessly against it. It was a minuscule application of the same power he used to form his tailed beast ball, a flicker of mastery. You ate something weird, didn't you? Naruto asked, tilting his head. Before the man could answer, Yamato's kanabo came down like a thunderclap. She didn't aim for the man, but for the floor in front of him. The stone shattered, and the shockwave sent the Spider-Man flying backwards into a wall, where he slumped down, stunned. He ate a devil fruit, Yamato explained, stepping over the groaning pirates. One of the smiles. Artificial ones. They grant shoddy animal powers, and most who eat them lose the ability to do anything but laugh. And they can never swim again. Can't swim. Naruto repeated, his brow furrowed. That was a weakness he understood. Being a shinobi meant being able to fight on any terrain. Water was just another battlefield. To sacrifice that. That's a heavy price for a power that doesn't even seem that great. Freedom is a concept they don't understand. They only crave power, no matter the cost, Yamato said dismissively. They were moving again, climbing a wide, spiraling staircase. The energy you used to block him, that black lightning around my club, it's called haki. It's the manifestation of a person's spirit, their willpower. With enough training, you can use it to coat yourself, creating an invisible armor or enhancing your attacks. It's the only way to reliably harm the most powerful devil fruit users, like my father. Willpower made manifest. Naruto nodded to himself. It sounded like a raw, untamed version of what he did with his own chakra. Sage mode was about blending with the will of the world. This haki seemed to be about imposing your own will onto the world. Different philosophy, similar result. So it's like coating yourself in your own soul to hit someone, Naruto mused aloud. Yamato gave him a surprised look. That's a surprisingly accurate way to put it. Yes. They reached a landing, a wide balcony overlooking a scene of pure pandemonium. Below them was the live floor, a colossal hall where thousands of beast pirates and samurai were locked in a swirling, chaotic melee. In the center of it all, a woman easily 3 times Naruto's height, with pink hair and a cruel smile, was rampaging. Big Mom. The name floated up from the minds of the pirates he'd erased. Another emperor, like Kaido. This is a mess, Naruto stated, his sage senses taking in the entire battlefield at a glance. He could feel hundreds of friendly life signs, the samurai and their allies, being extinguished like candles in a gale. They were hopelessly outnumbered. Fighting like this, head-on, is just a meat grinder. You're trading lives for inches of ground. The scabbards, Odin's loyal retainers, went ahead to face my father on the roof, Yamato said, her voice tight with worry. Luffy, the man who will be Pirate King, is fighting his way up as well. But they're all being stalled. We're fighting blind. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Blind. He hated fighting blind. It was inefficient, wasteful, and it got people killed. He looked around. The balcony. It was temporarily empty, a small pocket of calm in the storm. Here, he said, pointing to a heavy wooden door tucked away in an alcove. We need a minute. Yamato blasted the door off its hinges with a casual backhand. It was a supply closet, filled with barrels of sake and crates of provisions. It was cramped, but it was hidden. They slipped inside, pulling the broken door mostly shut behind them. The roar of the live floor became a muffled, rhythmic thunder. For the first time since he'd landed in this insane new world, Naruto was in a quiet, enclosed space. The adrenaline began to recede, and the sheer vertigo of his situation threatened to buckle his knees. His world was gone. He was a ghost. You're bleeding, Yamato's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. He looked down. A piece of shrapnel from her barricade smashing had torn a shallow gash along his forearm. He hadn't even noticed. A trickle of blood ran down his wrist. Before he could say anything, Yamato ripped a strip of cloth from the bottom of her own white yuagi. She stepped closer, the cramped space forcing them into close proximity. He could feel the heat radiating from her, see the flecks of gold in her fierce eyes. She gently took his arm, her touch surprisingly soft for someone who wielded a weapon of such brutal power. Hold still, she murmured, her focus entirely on cleaning the wound and tying the makeshift bandage. Her fingers were deft and sure. It was a simple, practical gesture, but in the midst of the chaos, it felt profoundly intimate. He could smell the faint scent of ozone and winter that clung to her. Thanks, he said, his voice a little hoarse. He watched her tie the knot, her brow furrowed in concentration. The shackles on her wrists clinked softly. They were thick, heavy steel. A constant reminder. She finished and looked up, her face only a foot from his. The intensity was back in her eyes, but it was different now. It was questioning, searching. That clash, back in the courtyard. I felt it. Your past. The loneliness. It was like my own. Naruto held her gaze. There was no point in hiding. She had seen a glimpse of his soul. He would honor that by showing her his truth. I had a monster sealed inside me when I was born, he said, his voice low. The nine-tailed fox. My father put it there to save our village. But no one saw the sacrifice. They only saw the monster. I was an outcast. An orphan. The whole village, they looked at me with fear and hatred. For years, my only goal was to get them to acknowledge me, to just see me. Yamato's breath caught. It was the same story. A different cage, but the same story. My father chained me in a cave with a group of samurai he'd captured because I proclaimed myself Odin, she whispered, her own voice thick with memory. He gave them one sword and no food. He thought we'd kill each other. But they saw Odin in me. They protected me. They died of starvation so I could live. All because my father couldn't stand the idea of me admiring his greatest enemy. She unconsciously touched the shackle on her wrist. He put explosive cuffs on me when I was a child to keep me on this island. I lived for 20 years as a prisoner, my only window to the outside world a tattered journal. She finally pulled it out from within her robes. It was worn, the cover soft with age, the pages filled with energetic, sprawling handwriting. Odin's words are the only reason I'm still sane. Naruto looked from the journal to her face. He saw the fierce devotion, the desperate clinging to a dead man's dream. He saw a woman who had built her entire identity as a shield against the crushing reality of her life. He respected the shield. But he also saw the person hiding behind it. You're right, he said softly. It is the same. We were both prisoners of our heritage. A heavy silence settled between them, filled with a shared understanding that ran deeper than words. They were two sides of the same coin. Forged in the fires of isolation. Then, Naruto's expression shifted. The empathy was still there, but it was joined by a familiar, sharp glint of strategic fire. And prisoners don't win wars by charging into the dark. He stepped back, giving himself a bit of space. You said you're fighting blind. Let's fix that. Yamato watched him, confused. What are you going to do? Naruto just smiled, a flash of the confident, unstoppable force she'd seen in the courtyard. He brought his hands together in a simple cross-shaped seal. You wanted to know what I am, he said. I'm a one-man army. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The closet didn't just fill. It erupted. In a series of loud, consecutive poofs, the small space was instantly packed shoulder to shoulder with identical copies of Naruto Uzumaki. 10, 50, 100, then more, spilling out of the broken doorway and into the hall, each one a perfect, solid replica of the original. They filled the balcony, each with the same determined look on his face. Yamato stumbled back against the wall, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Her haki, her senses, screamed at her that every single one of these was real. They all had a life force, a presence. It wasn't an illusion. It was multiplication. The original Naruto stood in the center of the throng, his hands on his hips. All right, you all know the mission, he called out, his voice echoing among the dozens of copies on the balcony. Believe it, they all shouted in unison. Map the entire fortress. Every floor, every room, every secret passage. Locate all major combatants, the straw hats, the scabbards, the alliance leaders. Pinpoint Kaido, Big Mom, and their top commanders, the All-Stars. Track troop movements. Gather all the intel you can. Do not engage in major fights unless you have to. Your job is to be eyes and ears. Go. With a collective roar, the army of clones surged into motion. They poured off the balcony like a golden river, leaping to other floors, running down corridors, splitting up and disappearing into the depths of the fortress. Some used the walls, some the ceilings. They moved with the silent, disciplined efficiency of a special forces unit. In less than 30 seconds, the balcony was empty again. It was as if they had never been there. Yamato stared at the empty space, her mouth slightly agape. Her kanabo felt heavy in her hand for the first time. The sheer strategic implication of what she had just witnessed was staggering. It wasn't just a powerful technique, it was a conceptual weapon. Reconnaissance on a scale that should take an entire army weeks, accomplished in minutes by a single man. She turned to the original Naruto, who was leaning against the doorframe, a thoughtful expression on his face. What, are you? She asked again, but this time the question was filled not with suspicion, but with pure, unadulterated awe. Naruto met her gaze, his expression softening again. The godlike commander was gone, replaced by the man who understood her cage. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he said simply. Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox. Son of the fourth Hokage. Student of the Sannin. And the man who is going to help you free this country. He chose to be honest. He explained the basics, stripping away the dense lore of his world and focusing on the core truths. The tailed beasts, the village system, the endless cycles of hatred he had fought to break. He spoke of his dream to be Hokage, not for the power, but for the acknowledgement, so that everyone in his village would see him and know he was real. As she listened, Yamato's world tilted on its axis. He wasn't just a powerful warrior, he was a leader, a hero from another world, a figure who had achieved the very thing she was fighting for. He hadn't just inherited a dream, he had forged his own, against impossible odds, and made it a reality. The admiration in her heart for Kazuki Oden, an unshakable mountain for 2 decades, now had a rival. A living, breathing one who stood right in front of her. When he finished, a comfortable silence fell between them. The muffled sounds of war seemed a world away. Oden sounds like he was an amazing guy, Naruto said, breaking the silence. He looked at the journal in her hands. It's good to have heroes. They show us what's possible. My master Jiraiya, he was like that for me. I wouldn't be who I am without his story guiding me. He took a small step closer, his gaze gentle but piercing. He got to live his life. He had his grand adventure, wrote his story. But Odin is dead, Yamato. You're alive. Her name. He used her real name. It hit her with more force than his Rasengan. Almost no one used it. To her father, she was his son. To the world, she was Kaido's Oni princess. To herself, she was Odin. But to him, she was Yamato. He got to see the world and follow his dream, Naruto continued, his voice soft but firm. What about you? What about your adventure? It's great to carry on someone's will, to finish their fight. But what happens after? When Wano is free, and Odin's dream is realized, what will you do then? Odin was great, but who is Yamato? The question hung in the air, sharp and clear as a shard of glass. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a criticism of her life's purpose. It was an invitation. An acknowledgement that there was a person, a real person, separate from the legend she wore like armor. No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever thought to look past the horns, the club, and the famous name she'd adopted, to see the woman underneath. She had no answer. The very idea of a Yamato, who wasn't just a vessel for Odin's will, was a foreign country she'd never even considered visiting. What were her dreams? Her desires? To be free, yes. To see the world, yes. But those were Odin's dreams first. What was hers? Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, hot and unexpected. It wasn't sadness. It was the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of a door creaking open in a room that had been sealed for a lifetime. Before she could even begin to process the maelstrom of thoughts and feelings his question had unleashed, a subtle shift happened. Naruto's eyes went distant for a second. He flinched, a thousandfold cascade of sensory information pouring into his mind at once. Poof! The clones were gone. He stumbled, pressing a hand to his temple. It felt like 1,000 different lifetimes being crammed into his head simultaneously. The layout of the fortress, the smell of every corridor, the faces of thousands of combatants, the sound of 100 different battles, the emotional state of every major player, it all settled into his consciousness, not as a chaotic mess, but as a perfectly ordered, three-dimensional tapestry of information. His sage mind, honed by years of processing natural energy, sorted and filed it all in seconds. When he looked up, his eyes were blazing with clarity. The lost, empathetic man was gone again, replaced by the decisive commander. Okay, he said, his voice sharp and focused. I've got it. I've got everything. He strode out onto the balcony, Yamato following him, her mind still reeling from his question. He stared out over the chaos of the live floor, but he wasn't just looking. He was seeing a complete picture. Kaido is on the roof, just like you said. He's fighting 9 people, the scabbards. They're strong, incredibly determined, but they're losing. Their attacks are hurting him, but it's not enough. They're buying time with their lives. His gaze shifted downwards. Big Mom is on the 2nd floor, moving towards the roof as well. If she gets there, the scabbards are finished. The Straw Hat Captain, Luffy, is on the 3rd floor, fighting his way up. He's a force of nature, but he's being delayed by sheer numbers. He pointed a finger towards a far corner of the live floor, where a grotesquely large man with a metallic jaw was spraying the samurai with strange bullets. That's Queen, one of the All-Stars. He's using biological weapons, a plague. Disgusting. He then pointed to the opposite side, where an even larger man, built like a mountain with a mammoth's head, was single-handedly holding a gate against the Alliance's main force. That's Jack. Pure brute strength. Finally, he looked up, towards the sky visible through a massive hole in the ceiling, where fire and shadows danced. And that one, the one flying up there on black wings, covered in flames, picking off anyone who tries to get to the roof. That's King. The strongest of the three. He's the cork in the bottle. As long as he controls the air, reinforcements can't reach the roof, and the scabbards are isolated. He turned to Yamato, his expression grimly determined. Your friends on the roof are going to die if we don't change the equation. We can't take on Kaido and Big Mom at the same time. We can't stop the plague and the mammoth and the flying inferno all at once. We need to create an opening. We need to take out a pillar and make the whole structure shake. He looked back up at the fiery figure in the sky, his golden eyes narrowing into calculating slits. He saw the battlefield not as chaos, but as a series of objectives. And he had just chosen his. Your friends need time. The Straw Hat Captain needs a clear path. The best way to do that is to take out their strongest commander. To show everyone here, your father included, that his top officers are not invincible. He cracked his knuckles, a sound that was shockingly loud in the sudden intensity of the moment. I'll handle the flying one, Naruto declared, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable confidence. King. You get to the roof and help your friends. Buy them every second you can. He didn't wait for her permission or her opinion. He was already moving to the edge of the balcony, gathering chakra to his feet. He was giving her a choice, but he had already made his. He was taking the most dangerous, high-profile target on the board, drawing all the attention, and trusting her to do her part. He was trusting Yamato. She looked at him, poised to leap into a battle against a man famed for his invulnerability, and her heart hammered in her chest. He wasn't just a whirlwind of power. He was a brilliant strategist, an empathetic soul, and the first person who had ever challenged her to be more than a copy. Be careful, she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Naruto glanced back at her, a wide, feral grin spreading across his face. It was the grin of a man who lived for impossible fights, the grin of a hero about to do something spectacular. Always am, he said. And with that, he shot off the balcony, a golden blur rocketing towards the sky, aimed directly at the fiery angel of death. Chapter 3, A storm of fists and ideals. The air became a violent, roaring river. Naruto didn't fly, not in the effortless, graceful way the winged man did. He propelled himself, a golden cannonball fired into the sky. He kicked off the balcony with a chakra-infused burst that cracked the stone, shot through the open air for 100 feet, and then angled his body to slam his feet into the side of the fortress's upper spire. Another explosive push, and he was airborne again, using the colossal structure of Onigashima as his personal launch pad. Below him, the live floor was a tapestry of screams and steel. Above, the hole in the roof was a window into a private hell, where 9 desperate men fought a losing battle against a dragon in human form. And in between, acting as the gatekeeper to that hell, was the black-clad angel of death. King. He hung in the air, motionless, his massive black wings unmoving in the updraft from the fires below. A leather mask obscured his face, and a strange fire burned perpetually on his back, a detail Naruto's sage senses found deeply unnatural. He wasn't just watching the chaos, he was orchestrating it. A group of samurai with bird-like smile abilities tried to fly reinforcements to the roof. King didn't even seem to move. He simply kicked out, a flicker of motion, and a blade of pure vacuum energy shot from his foot, slicing through all 3 of them in a single, brutal instant. They fell from the sky like stones. He was the personification of a hard stop. The final no to any hope the alliance had of reaching their leaders. Naruto's final jump carried him high above the fortress, a golden arc against the smoke-filled sky. He twisted in mid-air, gravity taking hold as he plummeted down, straight towards King. The winged man finally turned his head, his masked face tracking the incoming projectile. There was no alarm, no surprise. Only a cold, professional annoyance. Another insect. King's voice was a deep, calm baritone, devoid of emotion. The sky above Onigashima is private property. You are trespassing. Then you can send me the bill. Naruto yelled back, his body wreathed in the brilliant gold of his 6 paths cloak. He pulled one of the black truth-seeking rods from the formation behind his back, the material shifting and elongating into a sturdy bois staff. He brought the staff down in a vicious overhead arc. King didn't bother to dodge. He simply raised his katana, its edge meeting the black staff with a deafening shriek of protesting metal. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, rippling the smoke below. Naruto used the recoil to flip backwards, landing silently on a nearby rooftop, his staff held at the ready. King hadn't even been moved by the blow. He remained hovering, perfectly still. "You are not one of the Alliance rats," King observed, his tone analytical. "Your energy, it is strange. Potent. But you are an unknown. And unknowns are not permitted in this war." He drew himself up, his presence swelling. "I am King, lead performer of the Beast Pirates. For the crime of interrupting this glorious conflict, I will personally erase you." He vanished. One moment he was hovering 50 feet away, the next he was directly in front of Naruto, his katana swinging for a decapitation strike. The speed was immense, almost on par with the Raikage's fastest state. Almost. Naruto's head tilted, the blade passing a hair's breadth from his neck. He felt the wind of its passage, the faint hum of haki coating its edge. In the same fluid motion, he spun, sweeping his black staff at King's legs. King simply stopped moving, his feet planted in the air as if on solid ground. The staff connected with his shin. Clang. It wasn't the sound of a staff hitting flesh and bone. It was the sound of steel striking an anvil. Naruto felt the impact jolt up his arms, a painful, jarring vibration. King hadn't flinched. He hadn't even registered the blow. He just looked down at the staff pressed against his leg with disinterest. "Is that all?" he asked, a hint of disappointment in his voice. He retaliated with a kick, his leg a black blur. Naruto brought the staff up to block, the impact sending him sliding back across the roof tiles, his feet carving grooves into the stone. The sheer physical power was immense. "He's tough. Unnaturally tough," Naruto thought, his mind racing. Even with haki, a blow like that should have done something. It's like hitting a mountain. "His life force is strange, Naruto," Kurama grumbled from within. "It's dense, almost inert. But that fire on his back, that feels like a beacon. It's connected to his durability." Naruto didn't need the prompt. His sage mode was already analyzing, parsing the flow of energy. He could feel it now. The flame wasn't just decorative. It was a state. A condition. "You are resilient," King noted, his professional curiosity piqued. "Most would be a red mist after that kick. Perhaps you will provide a moment's entertainment before you die." He raised his sword. But only a moment. Tempura udon. He launched a flurry of ranged attacks, thin, almost invisible slashes of haki-infused energy that flew from the tip of his blade. They weren't just sharp, they were explosive. Naruto was forced into a frantic dance, weaving and dodging as the roof around him erupted in a series of violent blasts. He needed data. He needed to test the limits of this invincibility. With a familiar cross seal, 20 shadow clones popped into existence around him. "Alright, guys. Let's see what makes him tick." "Believe it," the clones roared, and attacked as one. The sky became a maelstrom of gold and black. The clones swarmed King from every conceivable angle. Some threw kunai that bounced harmlessly off his leather-clad chest. Others engaged in close-quarters combat, their punches and kicks landing with the same futile, metallic clang. King became a whirlwind of efficient violence. He didn't waste a single movement. A slash of his sword bisected 3 clones. A spin kick erased 4 more in a cloud of smoke. He grabbed one by the face and threw it into another, both dissolving on impact. It was a massacre. But the clones weren't there to win. They were there to learn. As King moved, Naruto, the real Naruto, perched on a higher ledge, observing, saw the pattern. When the flame on King's back burned brightly, he was a fortress. Immovable, indestructible. But he was also slightly slower, his movements more deliberate, more grounded. Then, to dodge a pincer attack from two clones, King's flame suddenly went out. In that instant, he became a shadow, a blur of impossible speed that left afterimages in his wake. He reappeared behind the clones, his form leaner, faster. And in that moment, a third clone, one that had been hanging back, landed a clean punch to his back. This time, there was no clang. There was a grunt of pain from King. The clone dissolved an instant later from a retaliatory strike, but the information was already sent. The memory, the feeling of Knuckles connecting with yielding flesh, flashed through Naruto's mind. There it is, Naruto thought, a grim smile on his face. The trade-off. Flame on, he's a tank. Flame off, he's a speedster. He can't be both at once. Invincibility or speed. He has to choose. The puzzle was solved. Now came the execution. On the roof of the Skull Dome, the battle was reaching a desperate, bloody crescendo. Yamato had arrived like a winter storm, her Kanabo smashing into Kaido's flank with a thunderous crash that actually made the Yonko grunt and turn his attention away from the beleaguered scabbards. Yamato. So, you've finally decided to be a real nuisance. Kaido roared, his own massive, spiked club swinging to meet hers. The clash of Haki was a visible explosion of black lightning, cracking the very air and sending a shockwave that threw the already wounded samurai back. Yamato's arms screamed in protest. She felt like she was trying to stop a tidal wave with a stick. The sheer, oppressive weight of her father's power was absolute. I am Kazuki Oden, she screamed back, planting her feet and pushing with all her might. And I am here to take your head. Worororo. You can't even take me seriously. Kaido laughed, his strength overwhelming hers and sending her stumbling back. From her new vantage point, she saw it. The dogfight in the sky. A dozen golden figures swarming a single dark angel. She watched as clone after clone was effortlessly extinguished, incinerated by fire or cut down by sword. Her breath caught in her throat. She had felt his power, but King was one of the calamities, a man whose strength was second only to Kaido himself. Had she let Naruto leap into a fight he couldn't win? She saw one of King's fireballs, a technique she recognized as Imperial Flaming Wings, engulf three of the golden clones at once. For a horrifying second, she thought the real one had been caught in the blast. A sharp, protective panic lanced through her, an instinct so powerful it momentarily distracted her from her own life-or-death battle. Kaido noticed her glance. Wororo. Is that your new friend? He taunted. Don't worry. King will be finished with him soon. He's very thorough. The taunt snapped her focus back. Her grip on her club tightened, her knuckles white. He can handle it, she told herself, forcing the thought into a prayer. He's Naruto Uzumaki. She turned her furious gaze back to her father. She had her own role to play. Back in the sky, Naruto was putting his theory into practice. The last of the data-gathering clones had been destroyed. It was just him and King again. Your tricks are amusing, but they are pointless, King said, hovering before him. The flame on his back burned brightly. He was in defense mode. Tricks. Naruto grinned. That was just the warm-up. He raised a hand, and the air screeched as a Rasengan formed, but this one was different. A faint green aura surrounded it, and the sound was sharper, like 1,000 tiny blades. Wind style, Rasengan. He shot forward, thrusting the attack at King. As expected, King didn't dodge. He raised a hand to block it, confident in his invulnerability. The Rasengan hit his palm and exploded, not in a concussive blast, but in a focused burst of wind pressure that sent him tumbling backwards through the air. It didn't hurt him, but it broke his stance. It pushed him. That was all Naruto needed. While King was still correcting his orientation, Naruto was on him again, this time from above, a standard Rasengan in hand. King, annoyed, extinguished his flame to gain the speed needed to evade. He became a blur, sidestepping the attack with contemptuous ease. But Naruto had anticipated it. He wasn't aiming at King. He was aiming at where King would be. As King dodged, Naruto let the Rasengan in his right hand dissipate and formed another in his left in the same instant. He twisted his body, intercepting King's new position. King's eyes widened behind his mask. He was too fast to stop his own momentum and too close to re-engage his defensive flame. The blue sphere of chakra slammed into his side. The impact was solid and brutal. King cried out, a genuine sound of pain this time, as he was blasted sideways. The attack tore through his leather suit and left a raw, spiraling burn on his flesh. He wasn't thrown far, but his flight pattern faltered, and he dropped 20 feet before his wings caught the air again. He glared at Naruto, his composure finally cracking. The professional annoyance was gone, replaced by a cold, murderous fury. You, see. Not so tough when you're trying to be quick, Naruto said, landing lightly on another outcropping. It's a neat trick. But every jutsu has a weakness. This is not a jutsu. King roared, his fury making the air itself feel hot. This is the power of my race. A power you cannot possibly comprehend. He spread his wings wide, and the flame on his back raged, growing to an inferno. I will burn you to cinders. Extra-large imperial flaming wings. He became a living comet, a dragon of pure fire, rocketing towards Naruto. The heat was so intense it warped the air, and the attack was so vast it would incinerate the entire spire he was standing on. There was no dodging this. On the roof, Yamato saw the attack coming. It was one of King's ultimate techniques, a move that could level a city block. Naruto was directly in its path. Instinct, raw and primal, took over. She ignored Kaido, ignored the scabbards, ignored everything but the golden figure about to be annihilated. She took a deep breath, her chest swelling, and unleashed her own power. Namuji Hyoga. It wasn't a focused blast. It was a wave, a blizzard of pure, shimmering cold that shot from her mouth and into the sky. It wasn't aimed at King. It was aimed at the space between King and Naruto. The apocalypse of fire met the wall of absolute zero. The explosion was biblical. A titanic cloud of steam erupted in the sky, a roiling, churning mass of gray that instantly blotted out the sun. The sound was a deafening hiss that drowned out the entire battle. The fortress was plunged into a sudden, disorienting fog. King, his attack neutralized, was momentarily blinded, suspended in the center of the dense, wet cloud. His haki could tell him where Naruto was, but his eyes were useless. That was the opening. In the heart of the steam, Naruto's Sage Mode was a perfect beacon. The moisture in the air did nothing to hide King's location from him. He could feel his life force, his coiled muscles, the angry beating of his heart. Naruto sank into his stance. He didn't gather a Rasengan. He didn't form a tailed beast bomb. He closed his eyes and let the natural energy of the world flow through him, an invisible extension of his own limbs. Frog kata. He moved. He was inside King's guard before the winged man could even react. King sensed the movement and swung his sword wildly through the steam, but he was swinging at a ghost. Naruto didn't throw a punch. He pushed his open palm forward. The blow didn't connect with King's body. It stopped an inch short. But the attack wasn't his fist. It was the aura of natural energy surrounding it. An invisible, unstoppable force slammed into King's chest. King's body seized. He couldn't breathe. His muscles locked. It wasn't an impact he could block or armor against. It felt like the world itself had punched him, an attack that bypassed his skin, his bones, his haki, and struck his very life force. He choked, a strangled gasp, his wings faltering. Through the steam, he saw the golden warrior's eyes. They weren't filled with rage or killing intent. They were calm, clear, and absolute. "It's over," Naruto said. His right hand was already raised, a Rasengan larger and more potent than any before swirling in his palm, infused with the golden energy of the six paths. It churned with the power to grind mountains into dust. He thrust it forward. The Rasengan connected with King's sternum. For a moment, there was no sound. Only an impossibly bright light. Then, the world erupted. The steam cloud was blown away in an instant. King was shot from the sky like a stone. From a catapult, a black comet trailing smoke and sputtering embers. He slammed through the roof of the fortress's main keep, then the floor below it, and the floor below that, his descent a series of devastating crashes that shook the entire island. Silence reigned in the sky. Naruto hovered in the air, his golden cloak billowing, his breathing a little heavy. The sky above Onigashima was his. As King fell, his consciousness fading into a sea of pain and failure, a single thought echoed in his shattered mind. "Lord Kaido. I have failed you. My strength was not enough." In that abyss of self-recrimination, a new voice answered. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a cold, silent thought that was not his own. It did not have to be this way. The voice was a void, an emptiness that promised fullness. Your loyalty is absolute. Your flame is a symbol of that. It can burn brighter. It can burn forever. You can have the strength to protect him. Always. King's mind, drowning in defeat, clung to the impossible promise. Strength. Then, darkness took him. On the main roof, the fighting had stopped. Everyone, Kaido, Yamato, the last of the standing scabbards, had watched the final, cataclysmic blow. They had seen their impenetrable aerial commander swatted from the sky like a common fly. Kaido's perpetual drunken grin had vanished. He stared at the spot in the sky where Naruto now hovered, a tiny golden speck against the clouds. A flicker of genuine surprise, and something else, interest, ignited in his eyes. Worororo, a low chuckle rumbled in his chest, growing into a full-throated laugh. So, the little pest has some fangs after all. This is getting interesting. His gaze locked onto Naruto, a predator spotting worthy prey for the first time. Across the distance, Naruto's eyes met Yamato's. He saw the shock, the relief, the dawning awe on her face. He gave her a short, sharp nod. Your turn. A small, breathless smile touched her lips. He had done it. He had taken out a pillar. He had given them a chance. Her smile faded, replaced by a new, fierce determination. She turned back to her father, her kanabo held steady. The impossible task ahead of her felt, for the first time, a little less impossible. Chapter 4, The weight of a promise. The fall of a calamity was not a quiet event. It was a seismic shock that reverberated through the very soul of the battle for Onigashima. On the live floor, 1,000 conversations stopped mid-sentence. Beast pirates, who had fought with the arrogant certainty that their chain of command was inviolable, now looked up at the sky with a new, dawning fear. Samurai, who had been fighting a desperate, losing battle, felt a surge of impossible hope. One of the monsters could be beaten. One of the pillars could fall. Naruto didn't linger in the sky to revel in his victory. The moment King was down, he was already moving. He landed silently on the edge of the hole in the skull dome's roof, his golden chakra cloak receding until it was just a faint, shimmering outline. He looked at the scene before him, the 9 exhausted and bleeding scabbards, the monstrous form of Kaido, and Yamato, standing between them like a defiant shield. Kaido's gaze was no longer on the scabbards. It was fixed on Naruto, a burning, appraising stare filled with a predator's glee. You, he boomed, pointing his massive kanabo at Naruto. Golden Man. You have my attention. To take down King, you're no ordinary stray. I've been called worse, Naruto replied, his voice calm. He could feel the oppressive weight of Kaido's haki, a physical force that seemed to warp the air, but he stood unbowed. It was immense, but it was just power. He had faced the divine progenitor of all chakra. He would not be intimidated by a glorified bully, no matter how strong. Worororo. I like you. Kaido laughed. Come. Join my crew. A man of your strength should not be wasting his time with these weaklings and their pathetic dreams. With me, you could take anything you desire. Power. Wealth, fame. It is the right of the strong to rule. It was the same philosophy he had heard 100 times. From Pain, from Madara, from Obito. The belief that might makes right, that power is the only true law. And his answer was always the same. Naruto's eyes hardened. The only thing I desire right now is for you to get out of this country and leave these people alone. Kaido's smile vanished. A foolish answer. A wasted opportunity. He hefted his club. Then you will die with them. Before he could act, Yamato moved. Your fight is with me, father, she yelled, charging forward again, her own club wreathed in the crackling energy of her conqueror's haki. She was a blizzard of righteous fury, but Naruto could see it was a desperate, delaying action. She was buying time. But for what? His answer came a second later. From the floors below, a new presence shot upwards, propelled by a burst of steam. A young man in a red jacket with a straw hat on his head. He was a cannonball of pure, unadulterated will. Luffy. Kaido, the straw hat captain roared, his fist, now giant and coated in gleaming black haki, pulled back for a devastating strike. The path was clear. King was gone. The way was open. Naruto's strategic gambit had paid off. Naruto didn't interfere. This wasn't his fight to finish. It was theirs. The fight for Wano belonged to its people and their allies. He had simply kicked the door open for them. He faded back, his presence becoming a quiet, watchful one. The rooftop erupted into a new level of chaos. Luffy, Yamato, and the remaining scabbards now engaged Kaido in a frantic, earth-shattering melee. The clash of supreme haki made the dome itself groan, sending tremors down through the entire island. This was the climax. The final push. And Naruto's part in it, for now, was done. He turned and leaped down from the roof, a golden blur descending back into the bowels of the fortress. He had another problem to solve. He landed on the live floor, the central hub of the battle. His arrival was noted. The samurai cheered, their morale soaring at the sight of the man who had struck down a calamity. The beast pirates faltered, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The tide was turning. With the top commanders engaged or defeated, the beast pirate structure was crumbling. The samurai and the alliance forces, invigorated by hope, pressed their advantage. What had been a desperate slaughter was quickly becoming a decisive rout. Naruto didn't join the fray. He walked through the battle, a calm eye in a hurricane of steel and fury. A charging beast pirate would find himself tripping over nothing. A sword swung at a samurai's back would be mysteriously deflected. Naruto moved unseen, a guardian ghost, making small, precise adjustments that saved lives and turned the course of skirmishes without throwing a single punch. His true goal lay elsewhere. He found it in the fortress's lower levels, in the makeshift infirmary the samurai had established. The air here smelled of antiseptic herbs and death. Wounded men lay on crude pallets, their groans a quiet symphony of pain. And in the center of it all was Queen, the calamity of the plague, finally cornered by two of the Straw Hat crew, a man with a ridiculous blonde swirl for an eyebrow and a talking reindeer doctor. Queen, a grotesque cyborg a dozen times the size of a normal man, was laughing, his metallic jaw clanking. Zihahaha. It's too late. My masterpiece, the Ice Oni plague, is already spreading through the battlefield. Soon, all your friends will be mindless, frozen monsters, and they'll take you down with them. You can't stop it. The reindeer, Chopper, was frantically working on an antidote, his small hooves moving with desperate speed. I will stop it. I will save everyone. Naruto appeared beside them, his sudden presence making both Sanji and Chopper jump. Plague? Naruto asked, his voice dangerously low. He looked at the wounded samurai, at the faint, chilling blue tinge that was starting to appear on their skin. He could feel it with his sage senses, a foreign, viral energy, cold and aggressive, overriding their own life force. It was a perversion of nature. A weaponized disease. Who are you? Sanji demanded, taking a defensive stance. A friend, Naruto said, his eyes never leaving the afflicted samurai. What do you need? Chopper looked up, his eyes wide with frantic hope. I need a way to distribute the cure. I'm almost done, but I need to get it to everyone on the battlefield at once. And I need to neutralize the main source, that bastard's playgrounds. Naruto looked at Queen, who was still laughing, preparing to fire another volley of virus-laden bullets. This, he understood. This was not a glorious battle of wills. This was poison. A coward's weapon. It offended every principle he held. He didn't say a word. He held out his hand, and a truth-seeking orb detached from his back, flattening and expanding into a large, black shield. He appeared in front of Queen just as the cyborg fired a volley of his excite bullets. The playgrounds impacted the black shield and simply ceased to exist. The truth-seeking orb, a manifestation of all 5 elements and yin-yang release, was a conceptual nullifier. It didn't block the bullets, it unmade them, virus and all. Queen's laughter died in his throat. What? What is that? A cleanup crew, Naruto said coldly. He turned to Chopper. Finish the cure. I'll handle the distribution. He made another hand seal. Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. This time, it wasn't 100 clones. It was 1,000. They erupted from his position, a tidal wave of orange and black that flooded the entire lower level. The sheer density of bodies forced even Queen to stumble back. The clones were a perfectly coordinated force. Half of them formed a solid wall around the infirmary, their bodies a living shield against any interference. The other 500 fanned out, each one equipped with a small, empty scroll. Alright, listen up, the original Naruto commanded. Our mission is to contain this plague and punish the one who unleashed it. No mercy. On the other side of the fortress, in a massive armory, a different kind of horror was unfolding. The samurai, filled with the righteous fury of 2 decades of oppression, had broken through the beast pirates' lines. They had captured hundreds of them, the gifters, the pleasures, the ordinary grunts who had gleefully enforced Kaido's tyranny. The prisoners were disarmed and forced to their knees, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. They were pirates, but they were also Wano citizens, men and women who had chosen the side of the strong, who had tormented their own countrymen for a taste of power and privilege. Kinemon, the leader of the scabbards, his armor battered and his body bleeding from a dozen wounds from his fight with Kaido, stood before them. His face was a mask of grim, righteous justice. For 20 years, you have been our jailers, he declared, his voice ringing through the cavernous armory. You have starved our children, poisoned our rivers, and laughed at our suffering. You chose to serve a monster. Today, that debt comes due. He raised his katana, its blade catching the lamplight. For the future of Wano, this poison must be purged. Execute them all. A roar of approval went up from the samurai. Swords were drawn. The prisoners cried out, begging for mercy, their arrogance forgotten in the face of their imminent demise. This was the justice they had earned. The brutal, unforgiving law of the victor. Just as the first sword was about to fall, a voice cut through the air, calm but carrying an authority that stopped every man in his tracks. That's enough. Naruto stood at the entrance to the armory. He wasn't a clone. It was the original. Having left the plague situation in the capable hands of his duplicates and the straw hats, he had felt the surge of bloodlust and come to investigate. Kinemon turned, his expression hard. Golden Dano. This does not concern you. This is the justice of Wano. I'm making it my concern, Naruto said, walking slowly into the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flare his chakra. But his presence was a tangible thing, a quiet weight that settled over the entire room. He walked past the lines of samurai, his gaze sweeping over the terrified prisoners. He saw their faces, not monsters, just weak people who had made monstrous choices. He stopped in front of Kinemon. Killing them solves nothing. It just makes you the same as them. A younger, more hot-headed samurai stepped forward, his sword pointed at Naruto. They deserve to die. They stood by while our families starved. While Oden-sama was boiled alive. You weren't here. You don't understand our pain. I understand pain, Naruto said, his voice dropping, carrying a sudden, chilling weight of experience that made the young samurai flinch. I understand hatred. I've seen what it does. I've seen it consume people, consume villages, consume entire nations. It's a poison that never stops spreading. You kill them. Then their children grow up hating you. Then your children have to kill them. It's a cycle. And it's pointless. He remembered Nagato, his friend Yahiko's death turning him into the merciless god, Pain. He remembered Obito, the loss of Rin twisting his noble heart into a desire to erase all of reality. He had stood at the end of that road and seen the abyss waiting there. You won a war today, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over all the samurai. Don't lose the peace tomorrow. Kinemon's hand trembled on the hilt of his sword. They are loyal to Kaido. If we let them live, they will just rise up against us again the moment we show weakness. Then make them loyal to you, Naruto countered. Show them a strength Kaido never could. The strength of forgiveness. The strength to build something better. His words hung in the air, a direct challenge to their 20 years of suffering. He was asking them to do the impossible, to lay down their justified hatred and choose a harder path. A tense, suffocating silence filled the armory. The desire for vengeance was a physical hunger in the room, warring against the quiet logic of the outsider. Suddenly, a new voice echoed from the entrance. He is right. All heads turned. Yamato stood there, her kanabo resting on her shoulder. Her battle on the roof was over for now. Luffy had taken over the main fight, telling her to go protect Momonosuke, Oden's son. She had seen the gathering here and come to investigate. She had heard everything. She walked to stand beside Naruto, a solid, unwavering presence. She looked at Kinemon and the other samurai, her golden eyes blazing with the authority of the name she carried. Oden-sama's dream was not to fill Wano's graves with its own people, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. His dream was to open Wano's borders. To share its culture with the world. To build a new dawn. A dawn has no place for mass executions in dark rooms. She looked at Naruto, a flicker of something profound passing between them. He hadn't just challenged the samurai, he had challenged her. He had challenged the very idea of Oden's will as a dogmatic text. Oden was about freedom, about grand, sweeping gestures of life. Naruto's plea for mercy, it felt more in line with the spirit of Oden than a bloody revenge ever could. This was the first time she had ever taken Oden's will and actively interpreted it, modified it with her own sense of morality, a morality that was being shaped, right now, by the golden-haired man beside her. It was a terrifying and exhilarating step. We will not start our new era with a massacre, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. She was not just Kaido's child. She was not just a mouthpiece for Oden. In that moment, she was a leader. The combination of Naruto's unshakable moral authority and Yamato's powerful invocation of Oden's spirit was too much for the samurai to resist. The fire of their vengeance sputtered, replaced by a confused, reluctant understanding. Swords were lowered. The prisoners, weeping with relief, collapsed onto the floor. Kinemon looked from Naruto to Yamato, a deep, weary sigh escaping him. You are both right, he conceded, sheathing his katana. The decision cost him, Naruto could see that. But it was the decision of a true leader. The immediate crisis was averted. The political standoff was won. But Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stone-cold armory. The world was changing around him. His presence here was not a small ripple, it was a tidal wave, altering outcomes, changing fates. Later, as the battle outside finally began to die down, the last of the beast pirates either captured or having fled, Naruto and Yamato found themselves in a quiet, moonlit garden within the fortress complex. The fighting was over. Kaido had been defeated, a combined, reality-breaking final blow from Luffy signaling the end of his reign. The war was won. The air was still and cool. The screams had been replaced by the tired murmurs of the victorious and the scent of blood replaced by the fragrance of night-blooming flowers. You were incredible back there, Yamato said, breaking the comfortable silence. She had set her massive club down, and without it, she seemed less like a warrior demigod and more like a person. You didn't just win a fight. You won an argument. With an entire country's worth of pain. Someone had to say it, Naruto said, leaning back on his hands. He looked up at the moon, a celestial body so different from the one he knew. It felt alien. A painful reminder of how far from home he was. It's easy to be a hero when you're fighting monsters. It's harder when you have to stop your friends from becoming them. Yamato sat beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. The question you asked me, in the closet. Naruto turned to look at her. Who is Yamato? She repeated softly. I've been thinking about it. All through the rest of the fight. I stood on the roof, protecting Momonosuke, living out Odin's final duty, and I realized I was doing it because I wanted to. Not just because his journal said so. Today, when I stood with you against Kinemon, that was me. That was Yamato's decision. She looked at him, her golden eyes luminous in the moonlight. The fierce, almost manic fire in them had been banked, replaced by a warm, steady glow. Thank you, Naruto. He just smiled, a small, genuine smile. You did the heavy lifting. What about you? She asked, her voice gentle. You talk about breaking cycles and building a new peace, but you look at the sky like you've lost your whole world. The smile on Naruto's face wavered. The dam of control he had maintained through sheer force of will began to crack. The battle was over. The adrenaline was gone. There were no more distractions. Only the quiet, the foreign sky, and the crushing, soul-deep weight of his loss. I have, he whispered, the admission a shard of glass in his throat. I think I have. He told her. Not about his power, not about his victories. He told her about his wife, Hinata, and the two bright sons of his life, Boruto and Himawari. He told her about his dream, finally achieved, of being Hokage, and the family he had found in his friends and his village. He spoke of a world he had given everything to protect, a world he might never see again. The grief he had been holding back since the moment reality tore open finally broke through, not as a flood of tears, but as a profound, hollow emptiness in his voice. Yamato listened, her heart aching for him. She, who had been a prisoner on one island her whole life, could only barely imagine the pain of losing an entire world. She saw the pillar of strength, the godlike warrior, the wise leader, and beneath it all, she saw the man, lost and grieving and utterly alone. Without thinking, she moved closer and gently, tentatively, placed her hand on his. Her fingers were calloused from her club, but her touch was warm. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a simple, human one. An anchor in a storm. You're not alone, Naruto, she said softly. He looked at their hands, then up at her face. In her eyes, he saw not pity, but a deep, resonant empathy. She understood loneliness. She understood loss. She understood being an island. In that quiet garden, surrounded by the echoes of a war they had won together, something shifted. The bond forged in the heat of a single, soul-bearing clash, reinforced by shared ideals in a tense standoff, now deepened into something more. It was the quiet, dawning recognition of finding a kindred soul in the most impossible of places. A shared promise, unspoken but deeply felt, to face the uncertain future not as two isolated individuals, but as two parts of a new, unwritten story. Meanwhile, leagues away, on a sterile, grey marine vessel cutting through the dark ocean, a den mushi rang. Vice Admiral Enigmo, a man with a spider-like tattoo on his chin and eyes that burned with the cold fire of fanaticism, answered it. The voice on the other end was distorted, clinical. Report from Wano, Vice Admiral. Kaido has fallen. To whom? Enigmo's voice was sharp as steel. To the Straw Hat Alliance, sir. But our intelligence suggests the turning point was a new entity. Unregistered. Codename, Kogen no Kensei, the Golden Whirlwind. Power levels are incalculable. He single-handedly defeated the Calamity King. Enigmo's 8 spider-like legs, a result of his own devil fruit, twitched in agitation. An unregistered, god-tier individual operating outside the world government's control. A variable of catastrophic potential. It was an affront to the very concept of absolute justice. Find him, Enigmo commanded, his voice a low hiss. This golden whirlwind is a threat to the stability of the world. He is an anomaly. And anomalies must be erased. Chapter 5, Absolute Justice. Unbreakable. Will the dawn that broke over Wano was the first truly free sunrise the nation had seen in 20 years. It painted the sky in hues of soft pink and brilliant orange, casting long shadows from the broken spires of Onigashima. The air, finally cleansed of the smoke of war, tasted of salt and dew-kissed cherry blossoms. It was the dawn Yamato had read about in Odin's journal, the one she had dreamed of her entire life. But the reality of it, shared in quiet companionship with the man who had helped make it possible, was more profound than any dream. The week that followed was a blur of frenetic energy. Wano was not just healing, it was being reborn. Momonosuke, bearing the full weight of his father's legacy, was formally declared the new shogun. The surviving samurai, their thirst for vengeance tempered by Naruto and Yamato's intervention, channeled their energy into reconstruction. The captured beast pirates, spared from execution, were put to work rebuilding the villages they had once terrorized, a form of restorative justice that was both practical and deeply symbolic. Naruto, true to his word, took no official title. He was simply Naruto-san, a figure of mythic proportion who was surprisingly down-to-earth. He spent his days with his sleeves rolled up, 1,000 shadow clones dispatched across the country, their chakra-enhanced strength making the work of clearing rubble and rebuilding homes go 10 times as fast. He didn't give speeches or stand on ceremony, he simply worked, his actions a quiet testament to his philosophy of building rather than breaking. The people of Wano, who had been taught to fear overwhelming power, watched in awe as the strongest man they had ever seen used his strength to hoist beams, till fields, and entertain children with puffs of smoke that turned into tiny, harmless raisingans. Yamato was his constant shadow. She, too, had declined any formal role in Momonosuke's new government. The title of Odin felt different now. Less like a suit of armor and more like a cherished mantle she could choose to wear, or not. She found herself watching Naruto, fascinated by the casual way he wielded his world-altering power. She saw how the people were drawn to him, not with the fearful deference they had shown Kaido, but with genuine, heartfelt respect. He was a pillar, just as he'd told her, but he wasn't a pillar that cast a shadow. He was one that held the roof up for everyone. Their bond deepened in the small, quiet moments between the chaos of reconstruction. They shared meals, sitting on a half-finished roof, watching the sun set over the flower capital. She would tell him stories from Odin's journal, her voice filled with passion, and he would listen, truly listen, his head cocked with genuine interest. He, in turn, told her stories of Konoha. Not the grand battles, but the small things, the taste of Ichiraka ramen, the ridiculous rivalry between Kakashi and Guy, the pranks he used to pull as a boy. He was painting a picture of a home he had lost, and with every word, she felt her own world expand. One evening, they stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, the wind whipping through their hair. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. The Straw Hats were preparing to depart, their ship repaired, their log pose reset. It was the natural course of things. Naruto's gaze followed hers. "I don't know," he admitted, the simple words heavy with a universe of uncertainty. "Part of me, the only thing I want is to find a way back. To see my family again." He clenched his fist. "But I don't even know if that's possible. The energy that brought me here, it felt final. Like a door slamming shut for good." He turned to her, his expression a mixture of resolve and sorrow. "And part of me knows that whatever brought me here might still be a threat. That hum I felt, the wound, in reality. I can't just leave this world to face it alone." He looked at her, and his voice softened. "And I can't just leave the new friends I've made." The unspoken "you" hung between them, as vast and deep as the ocean itself. Before Yamato could respond, a sudden, piercing shriek cut through the air. It wasn't a human sound. It was the cry of a lookout from the coast. Both of them tensed. Naruto's sage mode flared to life, his senses expanding in an instant. Yamato's hand instinctively went to the kanabo she now carried strapped to her back. "Ships," Naruto said, his voice grim. "Dozens of them. And they're not pirates." He could feel the life forces on board. They were disciplined, uniform, burning with a cold, unified purpose. On the lead ship, he felt a presence that made the hairs on his arms stand up, a chilling, predatory focus, like a spider waiting patiently in the center of its web. And it was focused entirely on him. They raced to the coast. By the time they arrived, the first of the vessels had already reached the shore. They were stark, gray battleships, bearing the emblem of a stylized seagull. The world government. Marines. Hundreds of white-clad soldiers were disembarking, forming disciplined ranks on the beach, their rifles held at the ready. They did not look like a liberation force. They looked like an army of occupation. At their head stood a man who seemed to have stepped out of a nightmare. He was tall and imposing, but what was truly unnerving were the 8, long, spider-like legs that sprouted from his back, twitching and clicking on the sand. Vice Admiral Enigmo. His face was a mask of zealous conviction, his eyes burning with a righteous fire that was colder than any flame. Momonosuke and the Scabbards arrived moments later, their faces a mixture of confusion and outrage. "Vice Admiral Enigmo!" Kinemon shouted. "What is the meaning of this? Wano is now a free and independent nation. We are not affiliated with the world government. You have no jurisdiction here." Enigmo's cold gaze swept past them as if they were nothing more than insects. His eyes found Naruto in the crowd and locked onto him. The intensity of his stare was a physical force. "We are not here for Wano," Enigmo declared, his voice cutting through the salty air like a blade. "We are here for the anomaly." He pointed a sharp, accusatory finger at Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki. Codename, Golden Whirlwind. By the authority of the world government, under the doctrine of absolute justice, you are designated a threat to global stability of the highest order. You will surrender yourself for immediate containment. Resistance will be met with ultimate force." A stunned silence fell over the beach. The samurai looked from the imperious vice admiral to Naruto, their expressions bewildered. They were here for their hero. Naruto stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "I have no quarrel with you or your government. I helped free this country from a tyrant. That doesn't sound like a threat to global stability." You misunderstand, Enigmo said, taking a step forward, his spider legs skittering ominously. Your intentions are irrelevant. Your very existence is the threat. You are an unregistered individual possessing power on par with an emperor of the sea. You operate outside our laws, outside our control. You are a loose cannon on the deck of the world, capable of sinking us all. Absolute justice cannot tolerate such a variable. You will be contained, studied, and if necessary, neutralized. It is for the good of the world. The sheer, arrogant certainty of his words sent a ripple of anger through the assembled samurai. He is the savior of Wano. Momonosuke declared, his voice trembling with youthful fury but holding the steel of a shogun. We will not allow you to take him. Enigmo simply sneered. You are in no position to allow anything, boy. Stand aside, or be erased along with him. He was about to give the order to his men, but Naruto held up a hand. This is my fight, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm. He looked at Momonosuke and Kinemon. Don't get involved. These men are fanatics, not monsters. I don't want to see any of you get hurt over this. He then turned his full attention to Enigmo. His easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by the chilling calm of the sage. I'm going to say this one time. I am not your enemy. I have no interest in your politics or your power games. But I will not be put in a cage. Not by you, not by anyone. Turn your ships around and leave. Enigmo's sneer twisted into a fanatic smile. Resistance. As expected. He vanished. He used Soru, the Rokushiki high-speed movement technique, but his version was different. Augmented by his spider-like physiology, he didn't just move in a straight line. He skittered, his path erratic and impossibly fast, his 8 legs digging into the sand and launching him at blinding speed. He appeared in front of Naruto, his hand a rigid spear aimed at Naruto's heart. Shogun. Naruto didn't move. He just watched the attack come. The finger, hard as steel and coated in haki, was inches from his chest when it stopped, frozen in place. Enigmo's eyes widened in shock. His hand was encased in a shimmering, golden substance. A hand, made of pure chakra, had emerged from Naruto's cloak and caught his wrist. I warned you, Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. With a flick of the chakra wrist, he tossed the vice-admiral away. Enigmo flew 100 feet down the beach, landing in a crouch, his spider legs absorbing the impact. The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by a deeper, more fervent zeal. A devil fruit ability, he hissed. No, something else. It matters not. All aberrant power must be purged. Fire, he shrieked. The hundreds of Marines opened fire. A storm of lead and cannonballs converged on Naruto's position. Before anyone could even react, Naruto made a single hand seal. A massive, translucent, fox-headed avatar of golden chakra erupted around him, its skeletal ribs forming a protective dome. The bullets and cannonballs struck the chakra and dissolved into harmless puffs of smoke. Inside the dome, Yamato stood beside him, her kanabo in hand, her face a mask of furious disbelief. Their justice is to attack the person who just saved a country. They're insane. It's not justice. It's fear, Naruto said, his eyes locked on Enigmo. They're afraid of what they can't control. And they'll destroy anything that frightens them. The avatar faded as the barrage stopped. Naruto stood there, untouched. Enigmo's face was now a snarl of pure hatred. Rokushiki Oji, Kyumo Gundan, he roared. He launched himself forward again, but this time, he didn't attack alone. His form blurred, and suddenly there were 8 of him, his spider fruit powers combined with the high-speed movement creating solid-seeming afterimages, each one attacking from a different angle. Each one thrusting forward with a shogun or slashing with a Rankyaku air blade. It was a whirlwind of calculated, lethal force designed to overwhelm and dismember. But to Naruto's sage mode, it wasn't a whirlwind. It was a slow, predictable dance. He flowed through the storm of attacks, a leaf on the wind. He sidestepped a finger pistol aimed at his eye, ducked under an air sight that would have cut him in half, and deflected a hockey-infused kick with the back of his hand. He didn't counterattack. He just avoided. Effortlessly. He was making a point. Your best is nothing to me. The blatant, almost contemptuous ease with which Naruto handled his ultimate technique pushed Enigmo over the edge. His fanaticism boiled over into pure, unadulterated rage. Why won't you fall? He screamed, his attacks becoming wilder, more desperate. Because I have no reason to, Naruto said calmly, weaving through the desperate flurry. This is pointless. You can't win. Yamato watched, her heart hammering in her chest. She saw Naruto's restraint, his refusal to harm the soldiers, his patient defense against their commander. He was holding back, trying to de-escalate a fight he could end in a nanosecond. It was a display of power more profound than any Rasen Shuriken. It was the power of restraint, of mercy. But Enigmo wasn't listening to reason. He saw Naruto's mercy as mockery. Seeing his commander being humiliated, one of the marine captains gave a new order. His allies are his weakness. Target the horned woman. A squad of elite Rokushiki users, who had been holding back, broke from the main force. They shot towards Yamato, their movements blurring with sorrow. Yamato saw them coming, her grip tightening on her club. She was more than ready to fight. But she never got the chance. The moment they changed their target, the entire atmosphere on the beach changed. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure that felt like the bottom of the ocean. Naruto stopped dancing. He stopped avoiding. He just stopped. He stood still, his back to the charging Rokushiki users. And his head slowly turned, his golden eyes, no longer calm or patient, locking onto them. An aura of crimson chakra, jagged and malevolent, began to leak from him, mixing with his golden cloak. It was Kurama's chakra, raw and untamed, unleashed not as a weapon, but as a pure, undiluted statement of intent. Touch her, a voice echoed, seeming to come from Naruto and from everywhere at once. It was a dual-layered sound, Naruto's voice intertwined with a deep, demonic growl that promised annihilation. And I will erase you from this world. The elite soldiers, masters of their own willpower, froze mid-stride. Their training, their hockey, their zealous devotion to justice, it all evaporated in the face of that sheer, bottomless killing intent. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A law of nature being dictated to them. They felt their own souls screaming at them to run, that to take one more step would be to cease to exist. Yamato's breath caught in her throat. Her own Oni blood, her own conqueror's hockey, quailed in the face of that pressure. It was the protective fury of a force of nature. It was the roar of a god defending his most precious treasure. He wasn't fighting for an ideal anymore. He was fighting for her. The feeling that ignited in her chest was so fierce, so powerful, it almost buckled her knees. It was a supernova of affection, admiration, and a deep, possessive pride. It was love, in its most primal, absolute form. Enigmo, momentarily forgotten, saw his elites falter. He saw the red, demonic energy. He saw the shift. See the demon inside him, he shrieked, his voice cracking with madness. That is his true face. The face of a monster that must be destroyed. He lunged one last time, not at Naruto, but at Yamato, his hand a clawed spear. If you are his weakness, then you will be his undoing. He would never reach her. Naruto moved. He crossed the distance between them in a time so short it couldn't be measured. He appeared in front of Yamato, a golden shield. He caught Enigmo's attacking hand in his own, his grip like a vice of unyielding steel. I tried to be reasonable, Naruto said, his voice now a low, chilling whisper. The red chakra flared, and his eyes shifted, the pupils becoming sharp, vertical slits. You made your choice. He didn't punch him. He didn't blast him. He simply tightened his grip. Enigmo screamed, a high, thin sound of agony as he felt the bones in his hand and wrist crack and splinter. Naruto spun, using the Vice Admiral's own momentum against him, and slammed him face first into the sand. Before Enigmo could even register the impact, his body was pinned. 6 black rods shot from Naruto's back, stabbing into the ground around the Vice Admiral's limbs, torso, and neck, immobilizing him completely. The rods pulsed with a strange chakra that disrupted his devil fruit powers, his spider legs going limp, and suppressed his haki. He was helpless. A spider pinned to a board. Naruto stood over him, the red aura slowly receding, leaving only the calm, golden glow. He looked down at the defeated, hyperventilating Vice Admiral. I am not your enemy, Naruto said, his voice clear and ringing for all to hear. The Marines, the samurai, everyone was frozen, watching the silent tableau. But if you threaten my friends, if you threaten her, I will stop you. Every single time. He didn't kill him. He didn't even permanently maim him. He had delivered a decisive, absolute defeat, but tempered it with a final, deliberate act of mercy. It was a declaration of his power and his principles in a single, undeniable act. He turned his back on the pinned Vice Admiral and walked back to Yamato, his expression softening as his eyes met hers. Are you okay? Yamato couldn't speak. She could only nod, her heart feeling like it was going to beat out of her chest. She had fought her whole life for freedom, idolized a man for his adventurous spirit. But in that moment, she realized what she truly wanted. It wasn't just to be free like Odin. It was to be free, with Naruto. The world seemed to hold its breath. A new bounty poster would be printed tomorrow. The name Naruto Uzumaki would be spoken with fear and awe across the 4 seas. He had defied the world government, defeated a vice admiral without killing him, and laid claim to a power that could challenge the world order itself. But for Naruto, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the look in Yamato's eyes, a look of such profound, unguarded affection that it felt more real and more grounding than the solid earth beneath his feet. In a world that wasn't his, in a reality that felt like a fragile dream, that look was the one thing he knew he could hold on to. It was home. Chapter 6, Dragon vs. Fox. The defeat of Vice Admiral Enigmo was not the end of the day's troubles. It was merely the prelude. The world government's forces, leaderless and utterly demoralized by Naruto's display, were in a state of confused paralysis. The samurai of Wano, emboldened and furious at the intrusion, were a breath away from turning the beach into a bloodbath. It took all of Naruto's newfound authority, a quiet word to Momonosuke, to hold them back, to turn the confrontation into a tense, armed standoff rather than a massacre. But as Naruto stood on that beach, a line in the sand between two opposing forces, his sage mode screamed a warning. It wasn't a threat from the ships or from the samurai. It was a threat from above. A shadow fell over the entire coastline, a darkness so vast it blotted out the midday sun. Every person on the beach, marine and samurai alike, looked up. A collective gasp of pure, primal terror swept through the crowd. Descending from the heavens, wreathed in dark clouds and crackling black-red lightning, was a dragon. Not a creature of myth or a devil fruit imitation. This was the real thing, a serpentine beast of impossible scale, its body miles long, its azure scales shimmering like a mountain range of sapphires. Its eyes were molten gold, burning with ancient rage and drunken fury. Kaido. He had not been truly defeated. Luffy's final, earth-shattering punch had knocked him from Onigashima, sending him plummeting into the sea, but it hadn't extinguished his spirit. It had only enraged him. And now, drawn by the commotion, by the spike of Naruto's power, he had returned. Worororo. His laugh was the sound of a thunderstorm, a rolling, deafening boom that shook the very foundations of the island. So, the rats have come to my home. The world government. The golden insect. All of you gathered to celebrate my demise. The party is not over yet. This was not the calculating warlord who had ruled from his throne. This was a force of nature, a living calamity fueled by wounded pride and potent alcohol. I will burn Wano to the bedrock. I will boil the seas. I will show you all the meaning of true power, he roared, and opened his maw. The air itself seemed to catch fire. A torrent of incandescent energy, a blast of pure, world-ending destruction, gathered in his throat. A burrow breath. Aimed not at Naruto, not at the ships, but at the flower capital. At the heart of the country, at the innocent civilians just beginning to taste freedom. It was an act of pure, nihilistic spite. There was no time to think. No time to strategize. Yamato. Get everyone back. Naruto yelled, his voice a sharp crack of command. He didn't wait for an answer. He blurred, a golden streak moving faster than the eye could follow, rocketing up into the sky to meet the apocalypse head-on. The world turned white. From the ground, all they saw was a flash of gold colliding with a river of fire. The burrow breath, a force that could vaporize a mountain, was met by a counterforce. Naruto, now fully cloaked in his six-path sage mode, had formed a tailed beast bomb in a fraction of a second. Not the small, controlled ones he'd used before. This was a dense, volatile sphere of pure yin and yang chakra, a miniature black sun. The two ultimate attacks collided midway between the dragon and the island. The resulting explosion was silent for a full second, the universe holding its breath. Then, reality shattered. A dome of pure, destructive energy expanded outwards, swallowing the sky. The sound that followed wasn't a boom, it was a physical blow, a wave of pressure that flattened trees for miles, kicked up a tidal wave from the placid sea, and sent every person on the beach, marine and samurai, tumbling like driftwood. Yamato, who had been roaring for people to take cover, was thrown back, her body shielded at the last second by a hastily formed wall of her own ice. She looked up, her heart in her throat, as the shockwave passed. Naruto was still there, hovering in the epicenter of the blast, his golden cloak torn and flickering. He had taken the full brunt of the feedback, his body smoking. He had saved the capital, but the cost was staggering. Kaido laughed again, the sound laced with mad glee. You have strength. Wonderful. It will be a joy to break you. He coiled in the sky, his colossal body a storm of azure and lightning, and dove. Yamato watched in horror. Naruto was powerful, yes, but he was alone, and he had just weathered an attack that would have atomized an entire island. Kaido was fresh, furious, and in his most powerful form. No, she thought, a fierce, protective instinct overriding everything else. Not alone. Her body transformed. It was not a conscious decision. It was a primal reaction. Her features sharpened, her teeth elongated into fangs. A celestial scarf of ethereal blue energy billowed into existence around her shoulders. Her skin took on a deathly pale hue, and her hair flowed, white and wild. She became a divine. Wolf, an ancient deity of Wano, her devil fruit, the mythical Zoan, Okuchi no Mikami, awakened by pure, desperate will. With a howl that was both beast and god, she launched herself into the sky, propelled by clouds she generated under her feet. She was a blur of white and blue, a winter gale ascending to meet a summer storm. Naruto saw her coming. He saw the transformation, the raw power, the beautiful, terrible form she had taken. And his heart ached. Don't, he wanted to scream. This isn't your fight anymore. You're free. But he knew it was pointless. She wasn't fighting for Wano now. She wasn't fighting for Odin. She was fighting for him. Foolish girl. Kaido roared, seeing his daughter ascend. You dare to point your fangs at your own father? You are not my father. Yamato howled back, her voice a chorus of divine echoes. You are a cage. And I will break you. She unleashed her own attack, a blast of pure, glacial energy from her mouth. Mirror Mountain. It wasn't fire, but it carried the same concussive, destructive force. It slammed into Kaido's side, the scales cracking under the focused onslaught of divine cold. The dragon roared in pain and fury, his massive head turning to snap at her. That was the opening Naruto needed. While Kaido was distracted, he appeared above the dragon's head, his hands a blur of seals. Sage Art, Lava Release Raisin Shuriken. A swirling vortex of wind and chakra appeared in his hand, but this one was different. It glowed with the incandescent heat of a volcano's heart, infused with the chakra of the Four Tails, Son Goku. He hurled it down, and it slammed directly into the back of Kaido's neck. The explosion was immense. The shuriken of wind shredded the azure scales while the lava-infused chakra melted them, boring deep into the dragon's flesh. Kaido screamed, a sound of pure agony this time, his colossal body thrashing in the sky, trying to dislodge the source of his pain. "Fine. Fine," he roared, his voice distorting as his form began to shift. The massive dragon body contorted, shrinking, reforming, shrouded in smoke and lightning. When the smoke cleared, he stood on the air itself, back in his hybrid man-beast form. It was his most powerful combat state, combining his draconic toughness and abilities with the speed and dexterity of a humanoid warrior. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. He was done playing. "You too, you have annoyed me for the last time," he growled, his voice a low promise of death. He pointed at Naruto. "Your strange tricks are over." He pointed at Yamato. "And your childish rebellion ends now." He vanished, moving with a speed that defied his bulk, appearing directly in front of Yamato. He swung his kanabo, Hasaikai, in a devastating arc. The club was coated in a layer of Conqueror's haki so thick it was visible as a crackling black aura. Reimai hack. Yamato brought her own club up to block, her divine wolf form giving her immense strength. The impact was cataclysmic. A sonic boom shattered the air. Her arms screamed, the bones groaning under the impossible pressure. The celestial scarf around her shoulders shredded. She was blown from the sky, a white comet arcing down towards the sea. Yamato. Naruto's roar was pure terror. He tried to go after her, but Kaido was already on him. The Yonko was a tempest of fists, kicks, and swings of his club. He was faster, stronger, and more brutal than anything Naruto had faced in this world. Naruto was forced onto the defensive, blocking and parrying a relentless storm of blows, each one carrying the force of a tectonic plate shift. He blocked a punch with his forearm and felt the bones groan in protest, even through his sage mode cloak. He dodged a swing of the club that tore a temporary hole in the very fabric of the air behind him. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a struggle for survival. He felt a searing pain in his side and looked down. Kaido had grazed him with the spikes of his club. The wound was deep, and it was smoking, the haki infused in the blow actively fighting the healing properties of his own chakra. "Worororo. You see now, boy." Kaido taunted, his grin a rictus of savage joy. "This is the difference between us. You fight for foolish ideals. For bonds. For weakness. I fight for only one thing, absolute strength. And in this world, that is the only thing that matters." He unleashed another furious combination. Naruto, his movements slowed by his injury, was overwhelmed. A haki-infused punch caught him square in the chest. The air was driven from his lungs. The world went fuzzy. He felt himself falling, tumbling through the air, his golden cloak sputtering like a dying flame. Below, Yamato burst from the ocean, gasping for air, her divine form gone. She was just Yamato again, bruised and battered, her arm broken from blocking that last blow. She looked up and saw Naruto falling. She saw Kaido descending upon him, club raised for the final, killing strike. A desperate, primal scream tore from her throat. "Naruto! The sound cut through the fog in Naruto's mind. He heard her voice. Her terror. Her desperation. It was an anchor in the storm of pain. Bonds, our weakness. The image of Irika-sensei, shielding him from Mizuki's shuriken, flashed in his mind. The image of Hinata, standing before pain, ready to die for him. The image of Sasuke, taking Haku's needles in his place. The image of Yamato, throwing herself in front of a vice-admiral's attack meant for him. No, you're wrong. Something deep inside him snapped. A reservoir of power he hadn't touched since his final battle with Sasuke. The golden cloak around him didn't just reignite. It detonated. A colossal form of pure, burning orange chakra erupted from him, solidifying into a form that dwarfed even Kaido's dragon state. A gigantic, nine-tailed fox, wreathed in an armored samurai shell of golden energy. The full Kurama avatar. The avatar's massive hand shot up and caught Kaido's descending club, stopping the killing blow inches from Naruto's falling body. Kaido stared in shock at the mountainous fox of pure energy that had just materialized. He felt the power coming off it, a raw, ancient, and deeply malevolent force, now harnessed by an unbreakable will. What is this creature? The avatar's other hand gently caught Naruto's body, bringing him to the center of its chest, where he stood, safe within its glowing, ethereal ribcage. From within the avatar, Naruto looked down at Yamato, who was treading water, staring up in absolute awe and terror. He felt her fear, her pain. He saw her broken arm, the blood trickling from her lips. And it filled him with a rage so pure and cold it burned. You heard her. Naruto's voice, amplified by the avatar, was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated across the sea. He raised his head, the fox's glowing eyes locking onto Kaido. You will pay for that. The fox avatar's 9 tails rose, and at the tip of each one, a tailed beast bomb raisin shuriken began to form, 9 spinning vortexes of apocalyptic destruction. Kaido's eyes widened. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. He roared and coated himself in a new layer of flame, his own power swelling to its absolute peak. Drumming dragon. The 2 titans clashed in the sky above the ocean. It was a battle of gods. The Kurama avatar's fists, each the size of a battleship, smashed against Kaido's haki-wreathed body. Kaido's club, swung with the force to shatter continents, cracked the avatar's chakra armor. Tailed beast bombs detonated against burrow breaths, turning the sky into a strobing hellscape of light and shadow. Everyone on the ground could only watch in mute terror. This was a level of power the world had never seen. This wasn't a fight. It was Ragnarok. Yamato, clinging to a piece of driftwood, watched it all, her heart tearing itself apart. She saw Naruto, encased in that terrifying golden monster, fighting with a fury that was almost suicidal. He was burning through his life force, she could feel it. He was pushing himself past every limit, all because Kaido had hurt her. Kaido was right. She was his weakness. Her presence here, her very existence, was driving him to this. In a moment of brutal clarity, Kaido saw an opening. As the Kurama avatar launched a punch, he didn't block. He took the blow head-on, allowing the chakra fist to slam into his shoulder, dislocating it with a sickening crack. But in that instant, he was inside the avatar's guard. He thrust his own fist forward, a concentrated blast of Conqueror's haki exploding from his knuckles. The blow passed through the chakra shell and struck Naruto directly. Naruto coughed up blood. The Kurama avatar flickered violently, its form destabilizing. Kaido grinned, his face a mask of blood and victory. I have you. He prepared for the final blow. But as he looked at Naruto, he saw the boy wasn't looking at him. He was looking down. At Yamato. His eyes weren't filled with rage or fear. They were filled with a desperate, terrifying softness. The Kurama avatar was crumbling, the golden chakra dissolving into motes of light. They were both falling again, locked in a deadly embrace. This was it. The end. And in that moment, with the world falling away around him, with death a certainty, Naruto's voice, raw and desperate, echoed across the water, amplified by the last dregs of his chakra. It wasn't a roar of defiance. It was a plea. A promise. Yamato. Live. Promise me you'll live to see the dawn. The word struck her with more force than her father's club. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a confession. In the heart of the storm, with the world ending around them, he wasn't thinking about victory, or survival, or his lost home. He was thinking about her future. A future he desperately wanted her to have, even if he wasn't in it. Live, so our story doesn't end here. It was the most profound, "I love you" ever spoken. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the salt of the sea. An answering roar tore from her soul. A promise. That promise, that desperate surge of emotion from her, reached him. It was a spark. A final log on a dying fire. He met Kaido's victorious gaze, and a slow, bloody smile spread across his face. "You're right about one thing," Naruto choked out, blood staining his teeth. "Bonds are my strength." The last remnants of the Kurama avatar didn't just dissipate. Naruto pulled it all inward. Every last drop of Kurama's chakra, every flicker of his six paths energy, he drew it all into his right arm. His arm became a sun, a blinding singularity of golden and crimson energy. It was everything he was, everything he had, focused into one, single, final attack. At the same time, from the sea below, Yamato was moving. Her broken arm was forgotten. Her pain was irrelevant. Fueled by his promise, she unleashed her own power. She became the divine wolf again, and took a deep, shuddering breath. All her haki, all her divine energy, all her love and desperation, channeled into one final, ultimate attack. Divine swiftness, white serpent rush, she howled. A colossal serpent made of pure, glacial energy erupted from the sea, rocketing towards the two falling figures. It wasn't aimed at Kaido. It was aimed at Naruto. Kaido saw it coming. A final, futile gesture, he roared, preparing to intercept it. But the serpent didn't attack. It flowed around Naruto, merging with him. The divine cold of the Okuchi no Mikami fused with the sun-hot energy of the Nine Tails. Ice and fire. Yin and yang. Sage and god. Her power became his. For a single, blinding instant, Naruto held the combined might of two worlds in his hand. He looked Kaido in the eye. "This is our will," he said. He thrust his hand forward. The attack wasn't an explosion. It was an erasure. A beam of pure, white gold energy, silent and absolute, shot from Naruto's palm. It hit Kaido square in the chest. There was no resistance. No struggle. The beam passed through him, and in its wake, there was nothing. The haki, the dragon scales, the indomitable will, the very idea of Kaido, the world's strongest creature, was unmade. He didn't scream. His eyes just widened in a final moment of dawning, absolute understanding. He had not been defeated by power. He had been defeated by a bond. By a will stronger than his own. Then, he was gone. The light faded. Silence fell. Naruto, his energy completely spent, his body broken, fell from the sky, unconscious. He didn't hit the water. A figure, wreathed in the fading blue light of a divine spirit, caught him, holding him tight against her chest. Yamato, her transformation gone, held the man who had given everything for her. She was crying, not from sadness, but from a joy so fierce it was painful. He was alive. They were alive. "I promise," she whispered to his unconscious form, pressing her forehead against his. "We'll see the dawn. Together." The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.